Hi, my name is Isabelle, and I'll be talking about our study Gender Differences in Emotional Responses to COVID-19. This was a study done in 2020 at University College London together with Bennett Kleinberg. So, we were interested in the potential impact of COVID-19 on mental health. That's why in early 2020, in March, at the start of the pandemic, we collected the so called real world worry dataset. And we asked participants to write about their worries and emotions regarding the pandemic, and also asked them to report their emotions at the time of writing. If you're interested in the original data set, you can also find it under WPRN under this ID on the slide. We asked participants to write long as well as short texts. The long texts were about a paragraph length long, and in this presentation I'll focus on the results we obtained with the long text only. So gender differences in language have been studied a lot in the past, and several studies have used the Luke, which is a dictionary that can be used to measure different psychological and grammatical constructs in text. And previous research, for example, has shown that women use more pronouns in their writing and more words related to emotion and social phenomena, whereas men use more articles, numbers, swear words, and write more about occupation and money. It's also possible to examine gender differences from a more bottom-up approach. There you can also see, for example, that some words are used more by men than by women. So the current study, we decided to examine gender differences with a specific focus on the pandemic. Like I said, we used a real-world worries dataset, which consists of about 2,400 participants who wrote about their worries and emotions at the time of the start of the pandemic. We compared the men and women in our dataset on the reported emotions. We constructed topic models to examine potential differences, and we looked at differences in engrams and Luke constructs. So the results for the topic models showed the following. In green, you can see that men used a topic more in their text that we labeled as the national impact. We also saw, again in green, that men wrote more about health worries and future outlook. In orange, you can see that the topic model showed that women wrote more about a topic that we labeled as family and friends, as well as a topic that we labeled as sickness and death. For the engram differences, we saw very large differences in word use between men and women. So women used words such as anxious, sad, feel, family a lot more than the men in our data set. And finally, we saw with the Luke comparisons that women used more pronouns overall, and this is a replication of the previous research I mentioned. The same holds for the men in our dataset who used more articles, but it's also interesting to see that the women in our dataset wrote more about anxiety and about family. So for the key takeaways from this study, by examining language, we saw that women focused more on family and friends when writing about their worries concerning the pandemic. Men in our dataset wrote more about national impact and the future outlook, as shown by the topic models. And finally, women in the dataset focused more on negative emotion. This could be seen both in the engram differences as well as the Luke differences. So we partially replicated previous research on gender differences in language, for example, concerning the use of pronouns in articles. But we suspect that some gender differences may have been even a little bit exacerbated by the pandemic. If you're interested in the full paper and some more background information, you can scan the QR code shown here on the slide. And thank you very much for listening.